Warning lights bathed the engine room in crimson as Sarah Chen's fingers flew across the quantum drive's control panel. The Resilient shuddered around her, its hull groaning under forces it was never designed to withstand. Above the cacophony of alarms, the ship's computer delivered its final automated message with artificial calm. Warning: gravitational anomaly detected. Hull integrity at 37%. Quantum drive containment failing. Sarah wiped sweat from her brow, leaving a streak of engine grease across her forehead. The drive's diagnostic screen showed exactly what she feared. The quantum matrix was collapsing. They'd hit something in the void between jumps, something that shouldn't have been there. Now the damaged drive was pulling them toward an uncharted planet like a moth to flame. "Bridge, this is engineering," she called out, her voice steady despite the chaos. "The containment field is destabilizing. We need to eject the core." Static answered her call. The command channel was dead. A particularly violent tremor sent her stumbling into the bulkhead. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs, but she pushed herself upright. The artificial gravity was fluctuating wildly. One moment she felt as light as a feather. The next she could barely lift her feet. The main screen flashed a new warning: core breach imminent. Sarah made her decision. Protocol demanded she wait for bridge authorization, but the bridge wasn't responding, and she had about 30 seconds before the quantum drive turned the Resilient into a brief, brilliant explosion in space. She entered her emergency override code and began the ejection sequence. "Computer, locate crew." Her hands never stopped moving as she spoke. Unable to comply. Internal sensors offline in all sections except engineering. Another violent shake. The deck plates beneath her feet buckled. Hull breach detected. Deck 1 through 4. Emergency bulkheads engaged. The bridge was on Deck 1. Sarah's throat tightened, but she forced herself to focus on the task at hand. The ejection sequence was at 90% when the gravity shifted again, this time with crushing force. She felt her knees buckle as her body suddenly weighed 3 times normal. Warning: planetary gravity well detected. Impact inevitable. The quantum drive ejected with a sound like thunder. Through the small engineering viewport, Sarah watched the glowing core tumble away into space, taking its deadly energies with it. But they were still falling, caught in the grip of a planet that shouldn't have been there. Sarah dragged herself to the emergency locker, fighting against the increasing gravity. Inside, she found what she needed: a reinforced survival suit designed for high-pressure environments. She just managed to seal the helmet when the first pieces of the hull began to tear away. The roar of atmospheric entry filled the ship. Warning messages scrolled across her helmet display as the suit's systems came online. Outside her viewport, she caught glimpses of a crystalline landscape rushing up to meet them through streams of superheated plasma. "Impact in 10 seconds, the computer announced, its voice distorting as the ship's systems failed. Sarah braced herself inside the mechanical maintenance crawlspace, engaging its emergency shock absorbers. As the ship screamed toward the surface, she thought of all the training simulations she'd run. None of them had covered this scenario. The impact came like a hammer blow. Metal screamed, crystal shattered, and darkness claimed her vision. The last thing she saw before losing consciousness was her suit's environmental readout. Gravity 1.8 times Earth normal. Atmosphere: toxic. External pressure: extreme. When she woke, she would discover just how accurate those readings were, and just how much humanity's strength would be tested on this alien world. Consciousness returned slowly, accompanied by the steady beep of her suit's life support system. Sarah's first coherent thought was surprise. She hadn't expected to wake up at all. Her second was that something was watching her. Through the cracked viewport of what remained of the engineering section, she saw them. At first, she thought they were crystal formations, natural growths sprouting from the glittering landscape. Then they moved. The beings stood roughly humanoid in shape, but their bodies were composed of interlocking crystalline segments that caught and reflected the light of twin suns overhead. They studied the wreckage with methodical precision, their movements careful and deliberate in the crushing gravity. Sarah checked her suit's readings. The atmospheric pressure outside would flatten an unprotected human in seconds. The air itself was a cocktail of toxic gases, and the gravity made every movement feel like pushing through deep water. But the suit was holding, for now. A scraping sound drew her attention. One of the crystal beings had noticed her movement. It approached the viewport, its faceted head tilting in what seemed like curiosity. Sarah could see straight through its translucent body to the crystalline organs within. Her suit's universal translator activated, picking up vibrations from the being. The translation appeared as text across her helmet display. Terminal structural integrity detected. Calculating remaining duration of biological functions. They thought she was dying. Given the circumstances, it wasn't an unreasonable assumption. Sarah pushed herself up, fighting against the increased gravity. Every movement cost precious energy, but she needed to show them she was more than a doomed specimen. Her suit's external speaker crackled to life. "I'm still functional," she managed, hoping the translator could convert her words into something they'd understand. "Engineer Sarah Chen of the Starship Resilient. I need assistance." The crystal beings drew back, their bodies emanating pulses of light that her translator interpreted as expressions of shock. More text scrolled across her display. "Impossible. Carbon-based mobility recorded at 1.8 gravity. Previous data indicates terminal threshold at 1.3. Sarah smiled despite her situation. They'd obviously met humans before, or at least studied them. But they hadn't learned everything about what humans could do. "We're stronger than we look," she said, carefully extracting herself from the wreckage. "And adaptable. This gravity is challenging, but manageable with proper support." The beings conferred in pulses of light too rapid for her translator to process. Finally, one stepped forward. Its crystalline form shifted, rearranging into a slightly different configuration. "I am First Observer Luminar of the Lithoid Science Council. You are the first soft form to survive impact on our world. Our data suggests you should have been crushed instantly." Sarah ran a quick diagnostic on her suit. The reinforced exoskeleton was stressed but functional. "Your data needs updating. Humans can survive a lot more than most species expect. I'll need to make some modifications to my equipment, but I can adapt to these conditions." The lithoid's light patterns shifted to a new frequency. "Fascinating. You speak of adaptation as if it were simple. We have witnessed 17 crashes of various species on our world. None survived more than 3 hours. Then help me become number 18, Sarah said, her mind already working on the engineering challenges ahead. "I'll need materials to reinforce this suit. The crash scattered debris across your crystal planes. With your permission, I'd like to salvage what I can." The beings exchanged more light pulses before responding. "We will observe and document your attempts. Your species' ability to survive here defies known biological limits. If you succeed, the data will be invaluable." Sarah took her first careful step out of the wreckage, each movement measured and precise. The lithoids watched with their strange crystalline eyes as she began her first day on their world, their bodies glittering with what she hoped was scientific curiosity rather than morbid anticipation. She had no intention of becoming just another data point in their studies of failed survival attempts. She was going to show them exactly what human adaptability meant. By the third day, Sarah's muscles burned with every movement. The lithoids had helped her gather scattered pieces of the Resilient, creating a makeshift workshop within one of their crystalline structures. Their own technology was beautiful but alien, tools and machines that operated on principles she was only beginning to understand. "Your muscle density has increased by 7%, First Observer Luminar noted, its crystalline form refracting the morning light of both suns. Previous xenobiological studies indicated this should be impossible. Sarah adjusted the servo motors she'd salvaged from the ship's cargo loader. "Humans are good at impossible. Our bodies don't just resist pressure, they get stronger under it. We call it adaptation." She worked methodically, connecting the motors to her suit's existing exoskeleton. The lithoids had provided power cells that would last for months once she figured out how to properly interface them with her equipment. Their energy technology was decades ahead of humanity's, but they'd never considered using it to enhance biological capabilities. Curious, another lithoid scientist chimed in, its thoughts translated as text across her helmet display. Your species intentionally stresses its structural integrity to increase durability. Our databases contain no similar examples. Sarah tested the joint servos, feeling the sweet relief as they took some of the strain. That's because you're looking at it wrong. You see biological systems as fixed structures. We're more like living crystals that reshape themselves under pressure. The analogy made the lithoids pulse with new understanding. Their crystalline bodies shifted slightly. A gesture she learned indicated intense interest. She stood carefully, testing her modified suit. The servo motors whirred smoothly, compensating for the crushing gravity. It wasn't perfect, but it would help her body adapt without breaking. Already she could feel her muscles and bones strengthening, a uniquely human response to environmental stress. Your cognitive functions remain unimpaired despite the physical strain, Luminar observed. Most species show significant deterioration under such conditions. Sarah smiled behind her helmet. Stress can make humans stronger mentally too. We evolved facing challenges. It's part of who we are. She took her first steps with the enhanced suit, moving more freely than she had since the crash. The lithoids followed, recording every movement with their advanced sensors. They'd been surprisingly helpful once they understood she wasn't about to expire, providing her with workspace and materials in exchange for the opportunity to study her adaptation process. We have updated our survival predictions, Luminar announced. Based on current data, you have a 63% chance of surviving beyond the previous record of 3 hours and 12 minutes. Sarah checked the atmospheric readings on her suit display. The toxic atmosphere outside still showed lethal levels of compounds she couldn't even pronounce, but her filtration systems were holding steady. She'd reinforced them using crystalline filter materials the lithoids had provided, another example of combining their technology with human ingenuity. On aiming for more than survival, she said, reaching for a piece of hull plating she would have struggled to lift yesterday. I'm going to thrive here. The servo motors hummed as she lifted the metal sheet. Her muscles strained, but the pain was different now, not the sharp agony of overexertion, but the familiar burn of strengthening. Her body was already adapting to the increased gravity, becoming stronger day by day. Impossible, one of the younger lithoids commented, its crystal structure vibrating with excitement. The soft one grows stronger instead of breaking. Sarah set the hull plate down carefully, already planning her next modifications. That's the thing about humans, she said, straightening up in the crushing gravity. The harder things get, the stronger we become. And just getting started. The lithoids' instruments recorded every word, every movement, gathering data that would soon revolutionize their understanding of biological adaptation. But Sarah wasn't thinking about being a scientific breakthrough. She was thinking about tomorrow and the next challenge and the next step in showing these crystal beings exactly what human strength could achieve. The grand chamber of the Crystal Council stretched upward into darkness, its walls formed from living crystal that pulsed with internal light. Sarah stood before the assembled council members, her enhanced suit whirring quietly as it helped her bear the crushing gravity. 2 weeks had passed since the crash, and she'd survived longer than any other off-worlder in the planet's history. Engineer Chen, the council leader's words appeared across her helmet display. Your continued existence presents us with an unprecedented situation. The council members towered above her, their crystalline forms arranged in a semicircle. Each one refracted light differently, creating a rainbow of colors that danced across the chamber's walls. Sarah had learned that among the lithoids, such light patterns indicated status and authority. I understand this is unusual, Sarah replied, standing as straight as she could. But I hope it can lead to something positive for both our species. The council leader's form shifted, facets realigning to create new patterns of light. Our scientists report that you have not merely survived, but have begun to adapt to our world. They claim your biological structure is actually strengthening. That's correct. Sarah confirmed. Human bodies respond to environmental stress by becoming stronger. It's a fundamental aspect of our biology. A ripple of light patterns cascaded through the assembled council members, their equivalent of murmured discussion. One of them stepped forward, its crystal structure tinted with deep blue hues. We propose a series of trials, the blue lithoid announced, not as a test of worthiness, but as a scientific study. We wish to understand the full extent of human adaptability. Sarah felt her heart rate increase. What kind of trials? The council leader gestured, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed various regions of their world. Canyons where gravity fluctuated wildly, forests of razor-sharp crystal formations, and plains where corrosive storms raged continuously. These are the most challenging environments on our world, the leader explained. Even we must take special precautions to traverse them. If you agree to attempt these trials, we will provide you with access to our technology and knowledge. Sarah studied the displayed locations, her mind already working on the engineering problems they presented. And if I succeed, we will help you establish contact with your people, the blue lithoid offered. Our communication technology can reach far beyond your current capabilities. Another council member shifted forward, its crystal structure emanating deep red light. But understand, no biological entity has ever completed these trials. We do not expect success. We seek only to document your species' limits. Sarah smiled behind her helmet. With respect, council members, humans have a long history of exceeding expectations. I accept your trials. The chamber filled with prismatic light patterns as the council members communicated rapidly among themselves. Finally, the leader spoke again. Very well. You will have 3 days to prepare for the first trial. Our scientists will provide you with data on the conditions you will face. Use this time wisely. As Sarah left the chamber, she heard the council members continuing their discussion. Her translator caught fragments: remarkable endurance, biological impossibility, potential diplomatic implications. First observer Luminar waited outside. You understand the magnitude of what you've agreed to? The scientist asked. These trials were designed to test the limits of crystalline life forms for a carbon-based entity. I understand completely, Sarah interrupted. And I'm going to show your council something they've never seen before, just how far human determination can take us. She began walking toward her workshop, her enhanced suit compensating for each step in the crushing gravity. She had modifications to make, systems to reinforce, and challenges to prepare for. But more than that, she had a chance to prove that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their technology or their biology, but in their relentless drive to push beyond their limits. The trials would begin in 3 days. Sarah intended to be ready. The prismatic canyons stretched before Sarah like a labyrinth of light and shadow. Crystal formations rose and fell in impossible angles, their surfaces reflecting the twin sun's rays in dazzling patterns. Her suit's sensors screamed warnings as gravity shifted around her. 2 times Earth normal, then 3, then barely half. The previous record for crossing the canyons is 4 steps. First observer Luminar informed her from the observation post. The varying gravitational fields typically cause immediate structural failure in non-crystalline beings. Sarah checked her modified suit's readings one final time. She'd spent the last 3 days reinforcing the servo motors with crystalline composites borrowed from lithoid technology. The suit now included gravity sensors that could predict shifts moments before they occurred. Time to break that record, she said, taking her first step into the canyon. The gravity pulled hard to her left, nearly 3 times Earth normal. Her enhanced suit whirred as it compensated, the new crystal hybrid servos responding instantly. Sarah moved with deliberate precision, each step calculated and smooth. Remarkable, one of the council observers noted. The soft one adjusts to gravitational changes instead of resisting them. Sarah had learned during her preparations that fighting the gravity shifts was futile. Instead, she needed to work with them, like riding ocean waves. She took another step, feeling the pull decrease suddenly. Her modified boots magnetized automatically, keeping her anchored as the reduced gravity tried to float her away. 4 steps, Luminar announced. Record equaled. Step 5 brought a crushing force from above. Sarah bent her knees, letting her suit absorb the impact while her strengthened muscles provided stability. The lithoids had never considered using their crystal technology as flexible support structures. Their own bodies were too rigid to benefit from such adaptations. Your core temperature is rising, Luminar warned. Previous subjects experienced total system failure at this point. Sarah kept moving. Sweat dripped down her face inside her helmet, but her breathing remained steady. The past weeks of living in high gravity had changed her body, made her stronger. Each step was a challenge, but no longer an impossible one. 10 steps. 20. She found a rhythm in the gravitational chaos, learning to read the subtle signs in the crystal formations that predicted the next shift. Her suit's sensors helped, but increasingly she relied on human instinct and adaptation. Fascinating, a council member observed. The subject appears to be anticipating the fluctuations. Sarah didn't respond, focusing entirely on her movement through the canyon. The crystals around her created interference patterns in the gravity fields. If you knew how to read them, they formed a map of sorts. Each step became part of a dance. Lean right as gravity pulled left, push down when it weakened, flow with the forces instead of fighting them. Halfway through the canyon, her suit's primary gravity compensator failed. The lithoid's instruments registered the malfunction immediately. Engineer Chen, you must return, Luminar called out. Your equipment cannot sustain these conditions. Sarah switched to her backup systems without breaking stride. The equipment doesn't have to last forever, she replied. It just has to last long enough. She pressed forward, each step bringing her closer to the far side of the canyon. Her muscles burned with effort, but it was a familiar pain now, the kind that meant growth rather than damage. The lithoids watched in stunned silence as she continued her gravity dance. When she finally reached the other side, even her backup systems were failing. But she had made it. Sarah turned to face the observation post, her suit scarred and strained, but still functional. Trial complete, she announced, standing tall despite the exhaustion. Humans don't just survive the impossible. We learn from it. Now, who's ready to see what else we can do? The canyon's crystals reflected the light of her triumph, and somewhere in the control room, the lithoids began to understand that they were witnessing more than just a test. They were seeing the birth of a legend. The electromagnetic storm rolled across the crystal plains like a living thing, its purple-black clouds crackling with energy. Sarah stood at the edge of the testing zone, watching the lightning dance between crystal spires. After her success in the prismatic canyons, the Council had accelerated their trial schedule. The storm will disable all electronic systems, First Observer Luminar warned. Even our crystalline technology cannot function in such conditions. We must postpone the trial. Sarah shook her head, checking the makeshift Faraday cage she integrated into her suit. Humans have something unique when it comes to electromagnetic fields. Our nervous systems are naturally shielded. The lithoid's instruments registered a massive energy spike as the storm front approached. Their own bodies flickered with internal light, reflecting their concern. Impossible, one of the council scientists declared. Our readings indicate field strengths that would disrupt any biological electrical system. Sarah smiled behind her helmet. That's because you're thinking of it as disruption. I'm thinking of it as power. She'd spent the last 2 days modifying her suit, adding crystalline conductors in specific patterns. The lithoids hadn't understood why she'd wanted to study their world's natural electromagnetic patterns. They were about to find out. The storm's leading edge reached them. Lightning crackled across the ground, making the crystal plains glow like a sea of stars. The lithoids retreated to their shielded observation post, their bodies vibrating with frequencies that her translator interpreted as mixture of concern and fascination. Sarah took her first step into the storm. Her suit's external systems shut down immediately, but her modifications worked exactly as planned. The electromagnetic energy followed the crystalline pathways she created, powering her suit's most critical systems in a way no battery could match. Remarkable, Luminar's voice crackled through the interference. Your biological functions are not only continuing, but appeared to be stabilizing. The storm's energy coursed around her, making her hair stand on end inside her helmet. Every human nerve ending tingled, but instead of pain, she felt awareness, a heightened sense of the electromagnetic landscape around her. We evolved on a planet with a powerful magnetic field, Sarah explained, pushing deeper into the storm. Our bodies learned to use it for navigation, for sensing changes in weather. Some scientists think it even affects our dreams. Lightning struck a nearby crystal spire, shattering it into thousands of glittering shards. The electromagnetic pulse would have overloaded any normal electrical system, but Sarah's crystalline conductors channeled the energy, using it to power her suit's life support. The lithoid's instruments recorded everything, documenting how her hybrid system worked with the storm instead of fighting it. Their own technology required heavy shielding from these conditions, but Sarah moved through the tempest as if dancing with a partner. Your species continues to defy our understanding. The council leader's voice cut through the static. You do not merely endure our world's challenges, you transform them into advantages. Sarah reached the center of the testing zone, where the storm's fury reached its peak. Lightning surrounded her in a cage of pure energy, but she stood unaffected. Her suit's crystalline pathways glowed with absorbed power, creating a beautiful network of light across its surface. That's what humans do, she replied, her voice clear despite the thunder. We adapt, we learn, and we grow stronger. Every challenge you've given us becomes a lesson, every obstacle a stepping stone. The storm raged on, but within it, Sarah had found a strange kind of peace. She was proving that humanity's strength went beyond mere survival. It was about understanding, adapting, and turning nature's most powerful forces into allies. As the lithoids watched from their shelter, they began to understand that they weren't just observing a test subject. They were witnessing the next step in the evolution of their relationship with the soft ones, who had proven themselves anything but soft. The laboratory hummed with combined human and lithoid technology. Sarah stood before a holographic display, her enhanced suit now streamlined with crystalline components that made it look almost elegant. 3 months had passed since her arrival, and the changes went far beyond her physical adaptations to the crushing gravity. The crystal matrix responds to human bioelectrical fields, she explained to the assembled scientists. It's not just conducting energy, it's resonating with it. First observer Luminar shifted closer, its crystalline form reflecting the hologram's light in fascinating patterns. Your neural patterns create harmonics we never considered possible. The implications for interface design are extraordinary. Sarah manipulated the holographic model, showing how human nervous system patterns could synchronize with lithoid crystal technology. Her time in the electromagnetic storm had led to this breakthrough. The discovery that human bodies could naturally attune to the planet's crystal formations. We can use this to build better environmental suits, she continued. Not just for humans, but for any species. The crystal matrices can adapt to different biological patterns. The council leader entered the laboratory, its presence announced by cascading light patterns through the crystalline walls. Engineer Chen, your innovations have sparked considerable interest among our people. Some are calling this the beginning of a new era. Sarah nodded, remembering how far they'd come from those first days when the lithoids had expected her to die within hours. Human history is full of moments like this, when meeting new challenges led to unexpected discoveries. She pulled up another hologram, this one showing designs for a new type of habitat. By combining your crystal technology with our adaptability principles, we can create spaces where both our species can thrive together. The crystals will respond to biological signatures, adjusting gravity and atmospheric conditions automatically. Remarkable, a young lithoid scientist chimed in. You've transformed survival techniques into cooperative technology. The council leader's crystal structure shifted, creating patterns that Sarah had learned to recognize as deep approval. We have received responses from your human authorities. They are eager to establish diplomatic relations. Sarah smiled, remembering the day they finally made contact with Earth. The lithoid's advanced communications technology had pierced the vast distance between stars, carrying her message home. The response had been immediate and enthusiastic. Humans have always dreamed of meeting other intelligent life, she said, adjusting the holographic display to show more design details. But we never imagined we'd find friends who could help us become stronger. Luminar moved to the central console, its crystalline fingers dancing over the controls. Your ability to adapt has taught us that strength takes many forms. We thought our world would forever be isolated due to its extreme conditions. Instead, Sarah completed the thought, it's becoming a proving ground, a place where different species can learn to overcome their limitations. The laboratory doors opened again, admitting a group of lithoid engineers. They carried samples of new crystal formations, hybrids created using principles learned from studying human adaptation. The first diplomatic team arrives next week, the council leader announced. Thanks to your innovations, they will find our world challenging, but not impossible. Sarah felt pride well up inside her. She'd done more than just survive. She opened a door between worlds. The suit she designed would allow humans to walk on this crystal world, while the hybrid technologies would help both species reach for the stars together. There's an old human saying, she told the assembled group. Pressure creates diamonds. Every challenge we've faced here has led to something precious. Understanding between our peoples. The lithoid's light patterns rippled in acknowledgement. They had learned that human strength wasn't just about physical endurance or technological innovation. It was about the power to turn obstacles into opportunities, to forge connections across the gulf of space and biology. Sarah turned back to the holographic display, already planning the next improvement. The bridge between their species grew stronger every day, built on a foundation of shared discovery and mutual respect. 1 year after the crash of the Resilient, the crystal plains sparkled with more than natural formations. A gleaming outpost of hybrid architecture stretched across the landscape, its crystalline spires and human-designed structures working in perfect harmony. Sarah stood at the observation deck, watching a group of human trainees practicing their gravity adaptation exercises. Their progress exceeds all projected models. First observer Luminar noted, its crystalline form now adorned with the markings of a senior scientific advisor. The latest batch of students achieved stable mobility in just 3 weeks. Sarah smiled, remembering her own first struggles with the crushing gravity. They have better equipment than I did, and better teachers. She nodded toward the lithoid instructors who monitored the training session, their bodies pulsing with encouraging light patterns. The outpost had become the premier training facility for human deep space missions. Anyone planning to work in extreme environments came here first, learning to adapt under the watchful eyes of both human and lithoid experts. The council has approved the expansion plans, Luminar announced. 3 more training facilities will be constructed in different gravitational zones. Your success has inspired similar programs on 12 other worlds. A massive cargo ship descended from the purple-tinged sky, its hull incorporating the same crystal hybrid technology that Sarah had pioneered. The vessel's systems worked in perfect harmony with the planet's electromagnetic fields, using them for power and navigation just as she had during the storm trial. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if the Resilient hadn't crashed here, Sarah mused, watching the ship land. If we hadn't been forced to learn each other's strengths. The observation deck screens lit up with incoming data as another group of scientists arrived. They were studying the long-term effects of human adaptation to extreme environments. The results had revolutionized their understanding of human potential. The medical implications alone have exceeded all expectations, a human doctor reported, approaching their position. The enhanced healing techniques we've developed by studying the human crystal resonance are being used in hospitals across Earth. Sarah nodded, pride warming her chest. What had started as a desperate bid for survival had blossomed into something far greater. The Lithoid's world was no longer seen as a hostile environment to be avoided, but as a proving ground where both species could push the boundaries of possibility. The diplomatic summit begins tomorrow, Luminar reminded her. Representatives from 27 spacefaring species will attend. They are particularly interested in your hybrid technology programs. The sun caught the crystal planes at just the right angle, sending rainbow refractions dancing across the observation deck. Sarah remembered her first view of this world, how alien and deadly it had seemed. Now it felt like a second home. Have the new environmental suits been tested? She asked, watching another training group emerge onto the crystal plains. Production has begun on the Mark 7 series, the doctor confirmed. They're incorporating the biological feedback systems you designed. Every suit learns and adapts with its wearer, just like you did with the original. Sarah touched the window pane, feeling the subtle vibrations of the planet through the crystal-enhanced material. Her own body had changed over the past year, grown stronger in ways she never imagined possible. But the real strength hadn't come from physical adaptation. It had come from building bridges between worlds. We're ready for the next challenge, she said, turning to face her colleagues. Whatever's waiting out there in the dark between stars, we'll face it together. Human adaptability and lithoid wisdom working as one. The crystal plains stretched out before them, no longer a barrier, but a beginning. Somewhere out there, other worlds waited to be discovered, other challenges to be overcome. But thanks to one human's determination and an alien species' willingness to learn, those challenges would be met with unprecedented cooperation and strength. The story of human strength Unbound had only just begun.